All right, I'm gonna start the countdown. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am your host, Osiris Prime, for episode number 133. That's right. It is our deep dive episode. This is Thursday, March the 5th, 2020. We're already into March. We're heading into, let's see what we got. Doom Eternal this week, or this month. Animal Crossing. I'm looking forward to that. But tonight, we're not going to talk about games. Well, sort of talk about games, but we're going to talk about the news mostly. With us tonight, we actually have everybody here tonight. I think it's been a while since we've had all four of us on the show. But we have first our tech guru, our tech master, our forge, if you will, to our X-Men. We have Mr. Agaskles Stamos. Agaskles, how are you? How are you doing tonight?
We might be getting too old for this.
We won't go into that. But up next, we have Mr. DBQ Hams. DBQ, how are you?
Oh, I don't get a X-Men comparison. Can I
No, I didn't have an X-Men one for you.
come back from the
I can
dead
go.
and
Let's
get
go.
my mutant powers back?
How about let's do
Um,
Mr. Analytical. You like to pick things apart. You like to analyze things, put them back together, take them apart, put them back together. You are Mr. Fantastic to our Fantastic Four. How about that?
oh, my stretchy arms and my
That's right.
white hair appreciates
That's right.
that.
You just need
So
the gray on the
that's
temples.
right. Just need the white sides. Woohoo!
I thought
Anyhow,
he was going with Scott Summers, and I was about to say sick burn.
I'll be the bad guy and die multiple times and keep coming back in different iterations. That'd be just fine. Anyhow, I was glad to be back. Thank you guys, and let's keep going on. And we don't need to. We're missing one other round out the cast here.
That's right. We got our fourth here, Mr. Swiss Guard. He's always on target. He always has his eye on the target. I don't know what else to say, but he's our Hawkeye to our Avengers. I lost my train of thought there for a second.
Hey, you had it going there. That was
I did have it going, and then I forgot what I was going to say. How are you doing tonight, Swiss?
That's good. I'm good. I can accept Hawkeye.
Hawkeye's not bad. He's not a bad guy. I like Hawkeye. All right, so let's get started tonight.
Except he appears to have been written out of the Avengers game.
Oh, really? I did not see anything about that.
Well, I've noticed this is on topic because this is about games. You guys haven't noticed that the most recent branding for the Avengers Final Fantasy, I don't know what to call it, MMO thing, does not have Hawkeye in the picture. It has Miss Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Has he ever been in the picture?
I thought he was. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
I
think he's been in kind of their tangential universe series comics that are supposed to be like the backstory, but I don't know that I remember him being there at the E3 stuff.
According to this article from June 2019, they teased his inclusion in the Avengers game, but he had not been shown in it. So it sounds like it never was. He never was. They have the other 5 from the original movie, and then not him.
Maybe not the start. They'll add him in. Well, I think even Miss Marvel's an add-in, isn't she? Or part of the game at some point.
I suspect, and it's completely speculation, that that the Jeremy Renner stuff was going on at the time, and so they kind of walked that back a little bit from having him headline in the cast. Because other than that, it is entirely very strange to me that you would have 5 of the 6 characters from the movies in there, but not him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe he'll everything dies down now, or will die down eventually. We'll see him back in there. Anyway, now that we've gone on that tangent, let's start up with the news for tonight. We got a lot of, I guess as usual, it's kind of bad news, I suppose. But let's start off with something kind of good, I suppose. Little Xbox Series X news. We've got some more details that they released this past week. And I'm going to just run kind of high level through some of these. And then if you want to kind of pick them apart, just let me know. We got the 12 teraflops of power. We have the variable rate shading, the hardware accelerated DirectX ray tracing, which I think they've talked about before, the ray tracing at least. Quick resume for multiple games. And the smart delivery. I'm going to pick a couple here real quick that I just find interesting is the quick resume. Now that is kind of like they do now, I suppose. Like if you turn off your system, and this is not just Xbox, but you turn it off, it goes to sleep. You turn it back on, and boom, you can start back into something. Sometimes that works on some games, most games, but other times I noticed that you kind of just get kicked back to the title screen or whatever.
And for that reason, I thumbs down this particular feature.
Right, yeah, if you have games that are doing a network check or that are connected, that you're going to get booted back after a certain period of time.
Yeah, like a Destiny or an MMO or something like that.
So,
Maybe
so,
you get.
so here's my big thing about it. I think did he mentioned the total RAM somewhere in here, right? Didn't they say up to 16? Did they say up to 16 gigabytes of GDDR5 or something like that?
Don't remember seeing it here. It might have been in another article, possibly.
I thought it was somewhere in here. I'll dig around for it. But here's my thing, and like just like you said, like smart resume as it is, or just I'll just call it. Is it called quick resume now?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, at least that's what they say here.
Okay,
Yeah,
I guess quick resume is for multiple games. I'll just call the single game that the Xbox One does now resume, right? It's janky, and it to me it is very similar to alt tabbing out in a game on PC, which generally I just other than because of the all the goofy gymnastics you have to do for live streaming, generally I just don't do. And when I do it, like 50% of the time, I expect that the game is going to crash and I'm going to have to restart it anyway. If I have 16 gigabytes of GDDR5, like I I don't have control over them, but like I don't want my games in suspended animation, right? Like if I pop out of my game, just let it shut down. Like give me all of that RAM back to use the system resources. When I want to play the game, I'm fine. The games still, for whatever reason, work best when they go through their entire startup sequence in a very smooth, calm, and stable manner, and then get up to the point where you're ready to start the game. Anything that's a mid scene dynamic pickup is still too unstable and too janky too many times. I'm not a fan of this, and I suspect you're not going to have control over it. I mean, I would be okay with it for something you could enable or disable, but I'm not looking forward. I'm not looking forward to having 15 games in suspended animation sucking up RAM, right? And then me still having to like restart them half the time.
yeah. I mean, I guess for us, because we kind of know computers and we kind of know how these things work a little bit. That's obviously we know that's it's not a good thing. I think this is more for like just kind of the regular Joe out there. Is like, oh, hey, I can just jump into, let's say, Tomb Raider or whatever, and hey, I gotta jump out, I gotta run, I could just shut it down and come back and it's there. So I mean, I guess it's fine as a feature. Um, yeah, I guess the multiple games. I mean, that's gonna be pretty bad. And I don't think they mentioned it here. I think it was somewhere else that they had mentioned that even if you did reboot, I'm not sure about a shutdown, but even if you like restarted the system, it would still come back up and pick up where it left off. So like I said, they didn't say it here, so I don't know if that was just like a rumor thing, or if someone heard that, or if Phil actually might have talked about it somewhere else. But
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It's the way it's the way iOS works, and I don't like that either. Like you completely shut your iPhone down, you
mm,
start it back up without you doing anything. It automatically loads in like dozens of apps that you had running beforehand into
yeah,
some type of suspend state, and I'm just like so obnoxious.
yeah, the Mac OS will do that too, but at least it gives you the option when you go to shut down, like, hey, do you want to resume where you left off? But so I don't know if they'll have that. They probably won't. Hopefully, they'll at least have the option like before you actually shut down, or go into sleep mode where you can actually like I think now it's like hit start or the little, I think they call it the hamburger tab, and you can actually quit out of the game. So maybe they'll have that. I don't know, at the very least. The other thing I was just going to point out real quick was the smart delivery. So that is where you buy a game, and there's two different things I guess for this. The way they explained it is, say you buy it on the Xbox One, say Halo Infinite. It's going to be optimized for that system. You boot it up maybe in Xbox Series X machine, and it'll like kind of all the graphic settings and all the settings will kind of like go up to that box. It's going to know that, hey, this is a more powerful box, so I can max it out the settings. So that's pretty cool. And also, well, when you buy something on Xbox One X, Halo Infinite, let's say again, excuse me, you'll have it just for that you only have to buy it the one time, so you don't have to buy it again on Xbox Series X and and so forth. If I'm assuming this goes till the next console generation or whatever. But so that's
This
kind of
is
cool.
an
And
amazing feature. Amazing feature. It's
amazing
so
feature that's
great.
long overdue, I think.
So great that I'm have been using it for a decade on a PC. Um,
Exactly.
right? I mean, it's exactly. I mean, I guess in some ways it is. It's good that it's happening. I mean, it is. It
Well,
almost. It'll be interesting to see
I'd say
what it does if Sony has to match it. But go ahead. What were you saying, guys? Please.
I'd say you've been using it for a decade on Steam. I don't know that I would because barring that digital storefront, if you bought a game, if you buy a physical copy of a PC game, you are you're buying it on PC. If you want a Mac or a Linux version, you're buying separate versions. It's only through Steam, as far as I think. Just with 10 seconds to think about it, that you buy the game and you can play it anywhere on any of the platforms that it's supported. Um,
Sure. I guess I'm reading this more as the Xbox One X, the Series X, whatever comes next. That it is. It's the equivalent of updating my graphics card or adding more RAM or updating my processor
right? No, yeah, I agree with you.
more than a different platform. But I mean, again, I think it's great. I think it's actually a really good consumer friendly move in this first year of a console kind of transition. Is that for somebody that may not be able to afford a new one, they know that they can buy a Microsoft game or CD Projekt Red game or whoever else joins into this project. Um, it also incentivizes somebody to get into the infrastructure of Game Pass if this is what's going to be functional within Game Pass as well.
Now the big gotcha with this is that it's not mandatory, and so Activision can sell the next Call of Duty on Xbox One, and then can charge you for the Xbox One Series X version if they so choose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as developer, it's up to developer basically, which interesting you brought up Activision, but of all the companies you could have said.
Well, it's
Well,
it's
because
no. Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
DBQ. No, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say I think Ubi did this last generation, right? Because you had like the $10 upgrade if you bought back Black Flag on 360 or PS3. You had a 6 month window where you could pay $10 and get the Xbox One X or Xbox One or PS4 version of it. So there was, they did something similar, but it was kind of few and far between in the last generation. So it'll be interesting to see what the adoption of this is.
What
Yeah.
what? Yeah, go ahead, Swiss.
I was gonna say Nintendo released Breath of the Wild simultaneously on the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, and there was not a hint of buy it on one, get it on the other, right?
That's because it was developed for the first one. That's because Nintendo would sell you Super Mario Brothers 3 on every console for the last 30 years, and there's not a hint of buy it on one console or another.
And
Right.
still do.
So what I find really interesting about this is, to me, this is very representative of a shift at Microsoft. In the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 days, what developers bellyached about was about how much more difficult it was to deploy on Xbox 360 because of all of the compliance requirements to deploy on the Xbox platform. I personally like that because the result was the Xbox 360 experience was much more homogenous than the PlayStation experience was. Games were wildly different in how they implemented things on the PlayStation 3, particularly with regards to multiplayer. Whereas when you were on Xbox 360, it was a wonderfully consistent experience where everything worked relatively the same, because you plugged into the Xbox 360 platform, and from a compliance standpoint and everything that came with it, functioned as advertised. What's interesting about this is that Spencer, at least for this, kind of flips that position and says, because my feeling is 10 years ago, Microsoft would have said, no, 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 no. Smart delivery, mandatory. That's how you have to. But now they're loosening up on that for this one thing. And I guess because it's hyper specific to business models, and said, in this area, we're not going to force any compliance, and you guys can do what you want to do. Now, of course, it's it's very funny that it's the year of an election because this feels like a partisan party play. Because of course, the publishers who don't do smart delivery are just gonna get hammered, in social media for being anti-consumer when other publishers are.
Yeah, and so far we only know of Xbox, Halo Infinite, and Cyberpunk so far that it's gonna be doing this. So we'll see. Any other of these that you want to talk about? I thought you had mentioned something, I guess, Cleese, in our chat with one of these. I can't remember. I think it was the variable
Uh,
rate shading.
yeah, I'll try and do these relatively rapid fire. So variable rate shading, I think, is huge. I don't think that this is a DirectX feature. So I think it's deploying first on Xbox One, and so what I look forward to is this coming over to PC in the DirectX library, because I think what's amazing is, like, this week I've been playing a lot more of Dirt 4. Racing games are always very compute intensive and hard on GPUs. It would be amazing. I mean, so what this essentially does is it reduces the amount of shading that is applied on pixels that people never see or don't pay any attention to. So it happens on both things that will be at the outer edges of your screen. And I think the way it works, it's a bit of an assumption, but I assume that the things that are directly dead center of the screen, where they expect most of the player's focal focus to be on, will be fully shaded, and then there's a medium ring, and then there's a low shade ring on the outer edges. But the other thing it does is it also does this to pixels that move very quickly, and so things that go by so fast that you would never pay attention to them, it doesn't heavily shade them. I think this is going to be incredible for the elasticity of compute on the Xbox, but then I also really look forward to seeing that on PC, like I said, in DirectX as well. The other one I think that's nice is dynamic latency input, which basically I may have this backwards. So that's a control thing. Actually it's I think it's the HDMI 2.1, which basically, auto low latency mode, which basically
Yep.
is able to detect the, I guess the best I can articulate is the specification between the Xbox, your cable, and the TV, and immediately set visual settings. Not so much the visual settings of the game, but things that are at a deeper layer that normally gamers don't go in and muck with. So we talk about. We've talked about, like, with 4K televisions, how there's like 3 layers deep of menus you have to go to before you finally enable like HDR and 4K. It's settings down in that area, but it impacts display refresh rate and game's frame rate. It's the type of settings that are associated with putting your TV in game mode. But these are things now that the Xbox will auto detect and set those settings correctly to offer you the best experience. I think that's going to do wonders for a lot of people who don't like digging down into those 3 and 4 layers of settings. And those were the big ones to me that I wanted to add: the variable rate shading and the HDMI 2.1 innovation. Of course, the problem with the HDMI 2.1 innovation is you got to have an HDMI 2.1 cable, I guess, and a TV that
That's
that
got
aligns to
those.
that
Yep.
spec.
Supports it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always exceptions. Excuse me. DB Swiss, any other comments on here?
No, I think what I guess we talked about. I think the variable rate shading should it'll be really interesting to see how that is implemented. It will be both artistically but also kind of processor intensive. It should allow for some. I'm interested to see how that all plays out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how it compares with like the PS5, just because I think I know Agascles is excited about these things, but the average consumer isn't aware of them. So unless there's like a marked difference in, like, I plug a PS5 into my TV and I plug the Xbox Series X into my TV, even though these things are happening, people may not appreciate them. So that's kind of, it's nice that the technology is moving forward, but I don't know how much it's going to penetrate people's consciousness.
Now, I think the two things here that will be relevant, in the competition, if you will, I think the clear one is the smart delivery, right? And I think it's going to be interesting. I would say slash funny slash comical, because this is historically a thing that Sony does not do. Is they don't give you credit, for and discounts as far as having bought a game on a different iteration of their hardware. So it's going to be interesting how if they do flip their business model for this. The second thing that I think is going to be interesting is the variable rate shading. And this gets a little nuanced. So the way I expect this may or may not have an impact is assuming Sony doesn't have the same thing or something similar. Over the last 2 generations, what we have had is we have had games that come out that are processor GPU intensive, that when things get busy on the screen, when you get high res cutscenes or you get lots of units on the screen, you on the 2 platforms that you'll get slowdown, right? This could create a situation where for let's say a game that performs the same across both, right, which has rarely been the case. Typically, the game has performed better on one than the other. But let's say for a game that performs the same on both, it could be that this what is essentially a software trick, right, or a code level enablement, could make that slowdown not happen on the Series One or the One Series X, while things could get slowed down on the PlayStation 5. So it'll be interesting to see that. We should see kind of the proof of that fairly quickly with things like Cyberpunk.
Right. It'd be very apparent to the player.
Yes.
Yep.
And then they just.
And,
Oh, go ahead.
and I hate to add one more thing onto this, but actually,
Okay.
the most interesting thing to me about this whole thing has been, and this is my first soapbox for tonight, has been the way the gaming media has handled this. For some reason, there was a big outcry about the elicitation of specs by Phil Spencer when this came out, and my response to this on Twitter was, look, just like Swiss mentioned, right? This is a thing where everybody has a different threshold for paying attention to this, right? It's within my radar sweep. It may not be within somebody else's radar sweep. And my response is, if it's not within your radar sweep, just calm down and just wait till E3. If the only thing you care about is the games, then it's okay. We will hit a point in the timeline where that will be important for Microsoft to reveal. But I don't think it's reasonable to expect that companies aren't going to talk about this information, because we're not the only consumers of the information. Development studios are consumers of the information. Publishers are consumers of the information as far as when they're making their decisions on which platforms they're going to support and how much. So, I have my own limitations, right? When Intel says they're going to blah, blah, blah nanometer fabrication process, right? I go, go into their next architecture and move in the memory control, right? That stuff is, even for me, that stuff is out beyond my radar. I'm like, when you name, right, the name of the processor, right, and I know that it's going to become a product that I separate. So we each have different thresholds for this stuff. I just think it's, well, again, I'm not satisfied with the state of the gaming media, and I think the banter that encourages gamers to be less informed about their products is not good, right? For the people who have the interest, I think, that should be supported. I think game media journalists some of them should know some of this stuff, and I don't think it's appropriate to bash on, the companies releasing the information or people who pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's not it's not like they plastered it everywhere. I mean, they just kind of put it up on their own website. So
Right.
it's like,
It's a blog post by
Yeah.
by a Microsoft executive on a Microsoft website.
Yeah, so that's all right. And then just real quick, they obviously mentioned Game Pass and then the backwards compatibility, which that stuff we already knew about, so that's good. The only thing, I guess, the question I have about the backwards compatibility, I'm assuming that's only for what they've already released from back on the Xbox One. I don't know if that's ever really been said. I don't mean, I'm assuming you can't just pick any old,
No,
Xbox
from
360
my
or
understanding
original
of it,
Xbox.
that's what it is. Is that
Okay.
it's any game that is currently within the backwards compatibility program.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yep.
I guess what I would add on to that is, as far as I can tell, and this is just speculation from what I've seen, there is a whole development team enabling backwards compatibility. that team is of such a size that I don't foresee that they would be quickly disbanded. Now, we may see less free. I mean, the way Microsoft has been handling that information has been, less and less. There used to be like a really big waving of the hands announcement like every month on which games were going into the BC program. Um, so, so I don't know. I don't know how much of that we'll see, but I think there's a. I guess what we don't know is we don't know how many games from let's say the original Xbox One have already been enabled for backwards compatibility, and how many are even not already in the program.
Yeah, no, I think it was maybe the end of summer, beginning of fall or so when they actually had announced that they're stopping the Xbox One backwards compatibility because they wanted those people to start, on the Xbox Series X, which they didn't know. We didn't know the name at the time, but they said that future generation hardware
Yep,
was
that
they would
was in
start.
in June.
So I guess we could just assume that they're going to keep going. Hopefully, I mean, not just work the ones they already have, into the Xbox Series S, but actually, keep going after that and say, hey, okay, here, maybe they'll start up again, like you said. We don't know, but maybe they'll start up again and say, hey, every month or two, here's some more games coming out for you guys. So we'll see. Hopefully, I think that's pretty much it for the Xbox. Let's get off of future tech and get on to some, I guess, present day or maybe sometimes near future tech here with the GeForce Now. I guess, at least I believe we have some, I don't want to say rats jumping ship, but people jumping ship, game developers jumping ship from this service.
Yeah, and this is my error because I actually, for some reason, like I said, I fell asleep before. I was thinking that the Xbox article was mine. So I don't know. That's totally my fault. I knew better, but at the last minute I got confused. Hey, over on mcvuk.com, written in a post by Vicky Blake, Bethesda pulls almost all of its games from NVIDIA's GeForce Now service. Bethesda is the latest publisher to withdraw its games from NVIDIA's new cloud gaming service GeForce Now. As reported by Game Sutra, NVIDIA made the brief announcement on the company's forums, but did not expand on why all Bethesda games, bar Wolfenstein Youngblood, arguably the worst game of the bunch. I would probably put this above Fallout 76, though. Had to be removed. Bethesda 2 has yet to publicly explain its decision. So this is a bit time late. More has come out since then. A bunch of indie developers were the most recent ones to kind of revolt and pull their games off of GeForce Now. Now, when this whole cycle started, when it started with Activision Blizzard, because it's Activision, of course, I immediately went, well, that's a really stingy, corporate, greedy thing to do. And then Bethesda did it, and now the indie devs have done it. So I've dug into it a little bit more. This is mostly being done out of, well, first of all, it's mostly being done because, I guess, NVIDIA didn't have the common courtesy to reach out to people and just say, hey, oh, by the way, when we open this program up for a subscription fee, we're still planning on, teleporting your games right from our servers out to gamers. What's not clear to me is I don't know that NVIDIA ever paid for even like a single license for these games. I mean, I assume that they did, but what I can guarantee is it certainly doesn't sound like they paid for 1,000 licenses, right, for these games. Most of the pullback is coming because what's bothering the developers is they feel, and this is from the indies up to the bigs, they feel that what this does when they haven't chosen to do it is it impacts their ability to monetize further sales of the game, either in mobile versions or making deals with Stadia or anywhere else. Because it creates a situation where somebody would go, why would I buy that on Stadia when I can play it on GeForce Now? Or why would I buy the mobile version of this game when I can play it on GeForce Now? Now, my guess is that that's going to get some pushback, potentially from members of our cast. So I've been spending some time thinking about some arguable scenarios to kind of can and frame this thing to make, at least to me, made the logic sound a little more reasonable. My first one is Fire Emblem, right? 3 houses versus DBQ. Help me out. What's the mobile version thing again?
Heroes. Fire Emblem Heroes.
Yes.
Heroes. So So arguably, potentially, people are played Fire Emblem Heroes. Swiss advised me one time because you can't take your Switch everywhere. But there might also be, you know, some people who don't have a Switch who played Fire Emblem Heroes for a period of time before they could afford it. My first instance is had if I had Fire Emblem Three Houses and I could play it on GeForce Now, would that potentially eat into sales of the mobile game? Because people would say, hey, from a portability perspective, I can go on business travel with my business laptop and still access Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I know that's Nintendo, but I'm hoping you kind of get my point in terms of games that have different versions across different platforms. You're entangled in the lore and in the ecosystem of that game. This might eat into a thing where you might try and buy what I would call a surrogate or substitute version because you can actually access the primary or core version via some other platform that's incredibly convenient.
But wouldn't that also work?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you don't even have to go to that kind of tangential piece. You've got for an indie dev something like Rogue Legacy or Hyper Light Drifter or Enter the Gungeon. That the mobile version is the same version except for maybe on-screen touch controls versus a Bluetooth controller as what you would get on PC. And so then it is the equivalent is even closer at that point for some small indie games.
No, yep, you're exactly right. Um, yeah, so I spent some time thinking about it. I think that the developer perspective is very valid. I think it's squarely right in the middle as to whether or not it's appropriate and okay and doesn't make a person a bad guy if they decide that they don't want their games on GeForce Now. From a license modeling perspective, what I mean, again, I think if Verizon bought an enterprise license from Microsoft and then said, "Hey, all Verizon customers, you guys can use our version of Office 365," I'm pretty doggone sure Microsoft would have a problem with that, right? And that, to me, again, this is kind of the analog, right? Nvidia, if they bought a license at all, bought a license or some small number of licenses for Destiny 2, right? Even though Destiny 2 hasn't been pulled and it's Bungie, not Activision, but whatever, Call of Duty, right? And then authorize streaming of that game to people wherever they were without paying any additional licenses. And yes, the person on the receiving end paid for a license, but as we all know, that's not considered the same thing, right? If I want to run software in multiple places, most business models don't necessarily accommodate that. Steam does, and that's a different thing. But in most cases, you know, that transportation and that portability winds up typically having some additional cost. The software company that I worked for, if you wanted to run our code everywhere, the licensing cost for that was higher than if you were buying it to run it on a server.
Yeah, I don't know like who you. I'm kind of curious which cast member you think would have pushed back and wanted to like defend Nvidia, but I'm with the developers. I mean, when I first actually heard like, I don't really think that just them buying a single license and then um spamming it out is kind of the thing. I think that annoys them. Uh, but like really, it's just like what is everything moving towards now? It's moving games as a service. So it's like the service portal has value, and if Nvidia just decided, hey, we're going to have all these things. Well, you bought the license, but now it's like you have this service portal, and all these developers are cut out from the collective bargaining agreement for that service portal. That's a problem. Even if like indies initially weren't getting anything from it, um, you know, they don't have any bargaining leverage. I mean, it was all just kind of done. It seems like it was kind of done without Nvidia really, like you said, asking permission. if you want to like, so I think when I first read this, my initial thought was NVIDIA is using the fact that the user purchased a license as a fig leaf and a justification for kind of not really being above board with the development community. Like they're saying, well, you already purchased something, they already purchased it, so everything is cool. And they're really not, they want to monetize the storefront, like their streaming platform, and they're not bringing other people in. I thought back, I Googled DVD monkeys. And I don't know if you remember back in 2011, there was this company that kind of, oh crud, oh no, I lost there it is. This company came up with this thing, and that's all I could remember from it, DVD and monkeys. And it was, the company's name was Zediva. Their whole business thing was they're going to be like a streaming platform where um, you want a movie, so say Avengers, whatever, we want to circle back to the initial, you'd connect to them, and they literally had a server farm full of DVD drives, and it would load the Avengers disc in one of the drives, and your interface was basically just a remote control, and it streamed it from them to your computer. And their thought was, hey, we bought all these discs. We're one customer gets one disc. We're not like manipulating it. Like we paid for the discs. We can rent them out just like Blockbuster did. And they were quickly shut down hardcore. And the reason why I remember monkeys is because they had a bunch of monkeys looking confused as like their were having trouble screen, and that like their last web page was a bunch of monkeys being sad, and that's how I remembered it.
That was actually this example. Swiss your example was brought up on the Giant Bombcast this week
Oh,
as
okay.
well, right? Because they were making jokes about that kind of business model and how quickly those have been shut down.
Yeah, so that's exactly what my mind jumped to. So was like, okay, this stuff hadn't worked in the past, and so I'm kind of curious why NVIDIA thought it would work now, especially if they're buying one license so that they can like then image it across a server farm. I mean, that's got to be, I don't know. I just because well, I know for Microsoft, like OEM licenses, and they're like a different thing. I can't take an OEM license off of one a laptop image and put it on my gaming rig and be like, well, I paid for it when I bought the laptop. It doesn't work like that. So we get the lawyers involved, it's going to be bad for you.
So, let me ask you a question real quick, because I hadn't really read up too much on GeForce Now, but I thought it doesn't have a storefront, right? It's just streaming what you already have. Is that correct?
No, it has a local client that you install on your PC. It has not necessarily a storefront, but it basically has a warehouse front, right? It presents games that are available in its inventory. Once you sign in and sign up for the service, it presents a section of that where it knows and acknowledges what games you have and that you're authorized to stream. But it doesn't create. It doesn't have create an ability for you to like buy a game
Okay.
through the client front end.
Okay.
So my nanny boo boo about this, right, is all the people who have been running around saying how much better GeForce Now is than Stadia. Well, flippin' ha, right? I mean, so Stadia still got its problems. I've been embroiled with them in a low intensity conflict the vast majority of the week. But the point is that Google went through a process and walked through this arguably the right way, right? Google went the Apple route that they walked the path that Steve Jobs walked to get all of the record labels right on iTunes, to get all of the movie studios and TV studios onto iTunes, right? They didn't pull it off with the resounding like global ubiquity that he did, right? But they went through a process. Nvidia didn't. Nvidia, I think, is much more harmed by this because they have to have strong relationships with a lot of those big publishing houses and developers, right? To get things like the plays best on Nvidia splash screen that comes up at the beginning of games. So it's interesting what's going to happen to GeForce Now. Whether it's going to be rebooted or redefined somehow. It's just it's an interesting blip. It's a
That
yeah. Go ahead.
your comment about Nvidia's relationships sparked this in me. I mean, what happens when you get a new RTX card? What does it always come with? 1 or 2 free games. Then you're like, why is Wolfenstein Youngblood? What just came out with the RTX cards this past summer? Wolfenstein Youngblood. So there must be some sort of like Nvidia has still some exclusive rights to that they weren't able to crowbar it out of GeForce now.
Or it was just the hey, we're gonna pull our games because you guys didn't talk to us about this, that you're damaging our business model because we already gave you some exclusivity license or something or purview on Wolfenstein Youngblood. We're gonna leave you that so you don't feel like completely robbed, right? This is the mob coming by taking everything that you own except like $100, so that you can't say that they took everything, right?
They just break one leg, not both. All right, let's move along now. After that comment, so
If they didn't break your fingers, you can still play video games. I mean, that's a
that's
really
right.
good thing.
Oh, I said legs. I mean, you only have one. You still have your hands. That's all you need, really, as long as your thumbs are good. Swiss. We have some Dead or Alive 6 news here. If you want to tell us about it, some DLC microtransaction
All right.
shenanigans that they're doing.
This isn't news because it's Dead or Alive 6. This is news because we have an early front runner for our Wretched Hive of Scum and Villainy award at the next year's E2KG Superlatives show. So, in Dead or Alive 6, apparently they have character cosmetics that you can deal with, and
Customization. A lot of
yeah,
games have that.
and not a big deal. I mean, you click a button and it should just change like the RGB value on the shader or whatever. It's not a huge technical achievement to change a hair color on a character. However, on PS4, they are charging you. Players must purchase a premium ticket in order to pick a new hair color for their fighter. And I got this from Chris Priestman's article on IGN. Um, However, purchasing a new hair color, that's kind of annoying, but like, hey, cosmetics is like a DLC thing. It doesn't affect the game. People kind of can expect that. However, purchasing a new hair color doesn't unlock it forever, as it also costs a premium ticket to revert the hair color back to a previous color. So premium tickets can only purchase at a minimum of 2, which costs $1.99. So essentially you're talking about 99 cents or $1 per change. This is a new level because they are no longer charging you for the hair color itself. They're charging you for the service of modifying the hair color. And then every time, what were you gonna say,
Oh,
DB?
You pay
you're
for a
breaking.
haircut. I mean, if you're gonna get your haircut again, you're gonna have to pay for
Yeah, but
it in
it's
real
free
life.
because you just to grow it back though. You don't have
So
to.
I say
You don't have to
that
pay
in
anybody.
jest, but NBA 2K18 had charged you virtual currency for haircuts. So you had to pay virtual money to get your haircut. And if you didn't like it, you had to pay again to get your haircut again. And there was some fan backlash. I mean, I agree, right? This is perfectly up there in the scum of villainy, but it's unfortunately not the first time that we have been charged for virtual hairstyles.
But
It go ahead, Gus,
but
please.
I guess my feeling is there to me there was an RPG kind of simulation as life kind of element to that because they wanted you to. I mean, because in real life you actually go to pay for a haircut, whereas I feel like in a fighting game we have a legacy of palette swaps for characters, and that not being something that's a fee based transaction,
Yes,
especially the
I
reverting
could.
back to the original template.
I can completely see that, right? Like this was, 2K had you were going through your neighborhood, and this was your neighborhood barbershop where you went in to go get your hairstyle, versus I'm selecting my character customization, needing to pay to get green hair versus red hair.
What's worrisome to me is I don't I don't think of Dead or Alive as Koei Tecmo's like flagship series anymore. So if they do this with Dead or Alive, great Scott. What might they do with Dynasty Warriors? Right, that to me is like the significant threat because that's a wildly more popular series that people go out, I think, in droves and still buy. Like every time an iteration drops, Ninja Gaiden. Um, I guess they published the Neo series as well, which has become wildly popular since the
Yep.
last iteration. This generation. Um,
Maybe this is their maybe they're
Test bed.
putting their finger in there and testing the way the wind's blowing and seeing if they can get away with it. For me, it's just the audacity of like I mean, I wouldn't really, I don't do these microtransactions. I don't like paying for things like this. I can understand like, hey, you want some special outfits and some special colors. You want to have that exclusivity when you're playing online. You got to pay up. I get that. It's just the audacity of we're not even gonna let you keep it. It's just the fact that you wanted to change. We're gonna charge you every time. And how many people bought it once, realize they don't like it, and then realize they have to buy it again? Well, I guess their argument probably is, well, the tickets come in twos, so you can change it back, but you can't. You can't buy one ticket. You have to buy two at a time. I don't know. It's just
Could have been 3. I mean, and then you're really been screwed. So
well, you can buy up to 50 for $45. So that's you do get a little bit of a savings if you're
well,
Oh, thank you. That's
bulk.
great.
You buy in bulk.
I really didn't think that we would see something that exceeded the greediness of the Battlefront 2 debacle. But
Oh,
we're not even 3 months into 2020, and here we are.
well 2019 was relatively quiet, I think, in terms of like I think that EA really quieted everybody down for a while, and maybe this is the first like weeds starting to spring back up, like as spring is coming, and like the developers think they can get away with it again.
Well, the curious thing is, so 2019 was the year of the offensive against loot boxes. I wonder if this is as kind of as you're mentioning, but just to refine a little, is I wonder if this is the first vestiges of it's not a loot box, right? It's the shuck and jive, right? It's the stiff arm to try
surprise mechanic.
right, right, to get away with something that is not arguably a loot box, and therefore, in their mind, should be okay.
Well, I don't know. All I can say is I guess it just makes it really does. Speaking of which, DB, you have a story here on the coronavirus
So,
bringing down. Did you have something else to say?
so I just want to do one intercept before we do the coronavirus. DB, do you want me to get on my soapbox before you go into this or after?
Hold on, you cut out. I lost
Yeah,
you.
you could ask.
Oh, you cut out just mid rant. What was going on?
So my question is, do you want
What do
me
you want me to get on your soapbox? What?
do you want me to get on my soapbox before you brief the coronavirus story or after?
Oh, is it infectious diseases related, or is it industry related?
It is media related, so I can do it
Okay, well,
afterwards.
okay, let's do it
Okay.
afterwards.
I was gonna say you better do
So,
it afterwards.
okay, so we will move on from infectious business practices to infectious diseases, and last Friday, the Friday the 28th, GDC had announced that they are postponing the game developers conference that came out after a number of big names, Sony, EA, Oculus, and a number of smaller, had pulled out from GDC as well. So they had delayed. They're postponing the conference They will continue with the Game Developer Awards. Those will be streamed on Twitch, so those will continue to go forward. That there is some, there has been some kind of GoFundMe's and gamedev.world accounts set up for smaller indie developers. A lot of the before we cede the floor to the media soapbox, some of the media coverage that I've heard about this has been about kind of the smaller developers, some of the smaller indie studios, or aspiring developers, not only from the United States but from international, from internationally who have purchased tickets, um, and so some of this is trying to provide some support for smaller devs. I think that's a nice community gesture, whether or not that's a required piece, but I think that there is a sense of community in that. Um, but that's the news story related to the GDC. Today there was an announcement that the Minecraft Festival has been canceled. Um, I didn't even know that the Minecraft Festival thing, but it's set to go on in Orlando, um, and that it was set to be a 3-day convention in September, and they have canceled it or postponed it again, just like GDC. GDC is talking about they haven't set a time of when they will um, re, try to reconvene it or what they'll do. It is the Game Developers Conference and the passes that they charge to studios for kind of an all access pass is where the game where um, they make the majority of their money. And so I could see why they would want to postpone it and not cancel the conference. But what that actually looks like when that slots in between E3 and um, Gamescom in Germany, we'll see what that looks like. So that is a news story. Before we turn the floor over to Agascles, are there any comments about the story itself? The soapbox is yours, sir.
Yeah, no, I don't have any. And just one thing, I think the Minecraft festival is called Minecon before, I believe, unless that's something different. I think they just renamed it, rebranded it.
I think you're right because they also it is done by Reed Pop, which also does Comic Con and both in New York and San Diego. So it makes sense that um, it had a con at the end of its name at some point in time.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, please.
So I'm glad that it worked out, that it was okay that I waited till the end, and I was glad we didn't tread into some of the territory that I've heard other game journalists on other podcasts tread, which I don't agree with. I've heard a lot of banter in the tech media and the games media over the last few weeks, encouraging people to go to the conferences, right? Extending beyond telling people where they can find information and getting into the you shouldn't be worried, people are overreacting, you should go to these conferences. And my own personal opinion of that is I wouldn't recommend that anybody do that. I don't think it's right for the games media and the tech media to do that. In my mind, although not technically perfectly aligned with Merriam-Webster, an outbreak is something that is inherently, by definition, unexpected. An outbreak, right? Like, an outbreak is something that occurs because, what we modeled and what we expected and all the controls that we put in place didn't work. And a thing occurred because of a datum that we were missing. So, I don't think, as in a lot of things, I probably tend towards the area that I don't think it's right for the media to try and tell people how they should behave. The media should arm people with information. Um, in the case of giving advice, I think it's okay for the media to say, if I knew X or if I knew Y, I would choose to do Z or A. But when we get into the people should ignore these warnings and go to conferences, I think that's taking it way too far. right?
See, now I want to compare notes to what you're reading or listening to, because what I've been reading and listening to, uh, I haven't felt like I've been that the sites that are not I'm stammering here, but I haven't felt like somebody is encouraging me as a consumer to still go. I think the sites or the podcasts that I've listened to that have talked about this have, I'm thinking of DLC that every 3 minutes they were saying, wash your hands, don't touch your face, right? I mean, that they were understandable about why the decision about this would be made. You know,
No,
I,
and I think that's good. I guess the similar to or the aberration that I've been exposed to is people who say wash your hands, don't touch your face, and you'll be fine if you go to a conference, right?
yeah,
And
right. There's a distinction there,
right,
right?
right,
It's
right, right.
it's not. I think that the hesitation about that is, I don't know that it, regardless of where that comes from, that's almost like there's a line there where it is medical advice, right? Like, yeah,
Right, exactly. Well, and then a lot of the everybody gets sick when you go to a con anyway. And I'm like, okay, right? And the comparisons to the flu, right? Well, more people die from the flu. I'm like, okay, but there's a flu vaccine, right?
yes,
There's not a coronavirus vaccine. So I don't know. I think some people have taken it too far, and really, to be quite honest, I don't even know. This is a tough story to handle. I think for the media and for journalists, I I there's a there's a lot of the spectrum of the coverage that doesn't need to exist within games media by any means, right? Um, but in general, just from a philosophical standpoint, I also feel like if we don't get a Last of Us demo in the month of March, I think we'll be okay. you know, so I
yeah,
don't know.
right. I mean, I think that and now it's my turn to step onto the soapbox. I think that we're going to see more of this, not necessarily in an alarmist outbreak potentially, but almost just in in good conscious and cautiousness, right? Like to bring a variety of people together, whether it's a sporting event like the Olympics, whether it's a media event, whether it is, that there is the potential, and reasonably so, for people to not be do undue need to be exposed to something that is still questionable at this time.
I will say, and again, the impacts that we're discussing in no way are comparative or in any way commensurate with the lives that are being lost. But I will say, just from an industry and economic impact, the next things to keep an eye on as far as um, could they have impact with our normal progression and enjoyment of life and that kind of stuff will be if E3 gets canceled, although it's arguable that E3 has been dying a slow death anyway. So that's an interesting thing to watch. And then if it gets into the summer, there's the potential that next generation console production could be impacted, and so that'll be. I would not at all be surprised, even that this early on, if unit supply will be constrained even more so than we're accustomed to. So
And there have been those stories out there already, where
Yeah, I
the
think for the
potential of
Switch,
seeing,
wasn't there? I think
yeah,
there's stories
yep,
on the Switch, the possible
possible delays and
supply. Yeah,
supply constraints. Yep.
yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead and
Yeah,
keep. I
I
didn't mean
mean,
to
no, I
cut
was
you
just
off.
gonna say that this is already. I mean, it's other entertainment mediums as well. There are news stories where the Bond movie is being delayed. The Mission Impossible has stopped shooting in Italy. That there are ripples, and again, I would completely agree with you, Gaston. These are superfluous ripples of our entertainment, when at the same time the reality of it is that there are people who are suffering and have lost lives because of
and just around things.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Prime.
No, no. Go ahead.
Well, and just to round things out, Swiss, I was not targeting anyone in particular with my comment that the cast might have some pushback on my consideration for the GeForce Now thing. I actually felt equally that any of the three of you may have had pushback, just because it's a complex story with like a lot of different moving parts and a lot of motivations, right? It's not an easy game theory problem to solve because different publishers and different developers may be on one side of that fence or the other, depending on what their business models are and whether they're not. I mean, it wouldn't happen something like this for Microsoft, right? Who's currently in a mode of trying to be very gamer friendly. Um, and I don't want to say give things a lot away, but focus on services. This might, if it were them, they might perfectly say, "Hey, yeah, absolutely, go ahead and stream our games via GeForce Now," right? But for somebody like trying to pick somebody to pick on, Activision Blizzard, I'll go that way again. Or maybe
It's
even
funny. You keep going back to Activision.
No, even just take a smaller developer. Take
right,
Annapurna Games
right,
or
or maybe
505. I
yeah,
mean,
505 games, or even I was going to say maybe even like Square Enix, right? Who, um, you know, may tend to be a little more like license by license, purchase by purchase driven business model. Might say no, 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 no. We don't want you streaming our games on GeForce Now. So nothing personal was meant by my statement.
Well, there's I saw a tweet from Jason Schreier, and this kind of goes on to like the after effect of all this. He was saying, hey, if obviously, excuse me, LA is in a state of emergency or has declared a state of emergency now. Say if they cancel E3, all these developers start doing, just the digital thing, kind of like Nintendo and Sony has been doing. I mean, everything seems to keep tracking smoothly afterwards after they just do the digital thing. Will there even be, an E3, come the coming years? I mean, that you can always think about it that way too, like just kind of the after effects of what's going to happen after all this too. And there's a lot. Obviously, there was a lot of companies already pulling out of E3 even before all this. So and obviously Sony had and EA has for the last few years. So I mean, it's just interesting to see what's going to happen coming in the future.
Now, the one last piece of speculation I'll throw out is I have also heard it speculated, and I've speculated myself. Um, is there for some reason in the supply chain of the PlayStation 5, is PlayStation 5 production or even the wrap up of the last messages of R&D being impacted, and is that why Sony has been so quiet up to this point?
I
oh,
mean,
that's an
yeah,
interesting
that's
tinfoil hat
possible.
kind of
It,
hypotheses.
it, it is, but it's also driven by like I'm hitting the point now in the month of March where my my thoughts on reasoning for this are starting to get beyond they're just being coy, right? This is starting to sound like thundering silence, right, in the face of an
Yep.
ongoing timeline where you're like, okay, man, something to me is starting to feel like you know not on the up and not on it feels like there's something wrong. Like the reason for this silence is not entirely just strategic and wait and see and let Microsoft, trying to give Microsoft a chance to, step on their own feet. Um, this feels this, this feels like the PlayStation 3 launch year, where the reality was that there was a problem getting enough blue diode lasers to produce enough Blu-ray drives to get in the PlayStation 3, and it was under serious threat of being delayed, and that definitely impacted the number of units that were available in the supply chain that year, and was with the end result of people were fighting and shooting people in Walmart parking lots trying to get PlayStation 3s because the supply chain was so constrained. So I don't know what they're putting in the PlayStation 5 this time around, but it's starting to feel and smell like there's a problem somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you saw them come out kind of. I don't want to say swinging, but they came out first with kind of some little bit of details on the PS5 initially, and then they kind of obviously they revealed the PS5. It was going to be called PS5 with the logo and all that, but it's been kind of quiet since then. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to say maybe they don't care because obviously they do, but I mean maybe they're not thinking of it like they've got such a big lead now, and I don't want to say it like that, like they're being arrogant, but maybe they're going like the Nintendo route and saying, hey, we're not going to worry about Microsoft this time around. We're kind of beating them the last time. Let's just kind of do our own thing and just you know just do go at our own pace basically. Or I mean, they could always just be waiting for Microsoft just to spill their their guts about everything, and then they come slamming down on them, kind of like they did at E3. But I mean, this time it's doesn't seem to be as it's obviously not as bad as it was when the Xbox One and PS4 were first coming out. So I mean, I don't know. Swiss.
I feel like I know we're pressed for time, but we got two more to this is going to circle back to our initial Xbox discussion. We have two more major PS4 exclusive releases, right? We have The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, which I think today they announced was going to come out in June or July.
June 26th.
Yeah.
Yep.
June. Um, is it possible? Here's some more tinfoil hat stuff. That PlayStation, and we've learned the answer now. Sony is not going to have that feature that allows you to buy it once and play it on multiple platforms, and they just don't want to steal the thunder of those two games because they're going to be PS4 exclusives and not available. Like you buy it on the PS4, get it on the PS5, type thing. So I wonder how much like Microsoft, I don't think has anything left that they're really worried about on the Xbox One, right? As far as game releases, Sony has two tentpole titles that they announced like 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago now, that they're still waiting to get out there, and so maybe they're trying to still focus on this generation before they really go 100% into the next gen.
That's possible. I mean, I think they've also announced that backwards compatibility will be a thing, will be functional.
That's true.
They have, but the big thing we're lacking is they have not towed up to the extent of that. They haven't been as
Yes.
aggressive and forward leading as Microsoft, who basically says, with very few exceptions, the entire library of the past platforms is going to be available on Xbox One Series X. We don't really know what backwards compatibility means for PlayStation 5, and we don't know if it covers physical or if it'll be all digital, or if a big chunk of that backwards compatibility is going to be behind the paywall of PlayStation Now.
Yeah, that's a very good point too, right? I mean, I think at the most we could potentially consider that they've messaged that PlayStation 4 games will be backwards compatibility, but even then they haven't been clear that it's across the board, right? I mean, they've already demonstrated that anything prior to that generation is already going to be behind a paywall of PlayStation Now, a digital store.
Yep. Well, we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. Any other comments on this subject or anything else we've talked about tonight, gentlemen? No. All right, so that'll do it for episode number 133 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. Please catch us on YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify. There's one more guest, please help me as I'm talking here.
Pocket Cast.
Pocket Cast, that's the one I couldn't remember before. All right, and Pocket Cast. For DBQ Hams, for Swissguard, and for Gascles Stamos, I am Osiris Prime. Thanks for watching. Catch us next week, same time, same day, hopefully. We're going to be doing our GX show where we will be talking about the games we've been playing the past week or so, a couple weeks. And I don't think we had a picks plays, right, from last episode.
I think we did. I think it's in the agenda.
Oh, I did? Okay. All right. So we'll talk about the picks plays. So catch us then. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next time.